3 pilots gone. 11 hospitalized. A fireball so enormous, it lit up the night sky miles beyond the airport perimeter. This is the shocking narrative of UPS Flight 2976, an MD-11 heavy hauler, that suffered a catastrophic failure mere seconds after leaving the tarmac in Louisville, Kentucky. It was meant to be an 8-hour haul across the Pacific to Honolulu. Instead, it became a mile-long trail of horrifying destruction, a fiery, impossible ballet that ended in oblivion. The question isn't just what happened, but why the cockpit crew committed to a maneuver they couldn't possibly finish. They were past the point of no return, hurtling down the runway carrying 34,000 gallons of highly volatile jet fuel. This is the untold story of the final, agonizing moments when the decision was made, and the consequences exposed the ultimate vulnerability of flight. But to understand this split-second horror, you have to first look at the machine itself. 2. The Cursed Bird, the MD-11's dark legacy. This wasn't some modern, sophisticated airliner. The MD-11, manufactured back in 1991, carries a notorious reputation in the aviation world. When it was brand new, it was the shiny object that promised the future, but that promise quickly curdled. Major passenger airlines universally began dumping the aircraft within just a few years of delivery. Why? Because the MD-11 was, simply put, a handful. It was complex, temperamental, and burdened with significant maintenance headaches. Crucially, early versions were known to suffer from stability issues, particularly during high-stress maneuvers like crosswind landings or, most critically, heavy takeoffs. It was a demanding machine, and while engineering tweaks helped, the reputation stuck. The planes that passenger carriers rejected ultimately found a second life with cargo titans like UPS and FedEx, where they were pushed to the absolute maximum of their structural and operational limits. For Flight 2976, that meant flying an aging design at max gross weight, a truly precarious situation. This flight was already carrying the weight of the aircraft's problematic history, but it was the fuel load that turned the potential accident into an inferno. 3. Max gross weight and the critical bomb. The sheer scale of the cargo and the fuel on board that night is almost impossible to comprehend. The MD-11 was fully loaded, preparing for an epic journey. To cover that 8-hour stretch to Hawaii, 2976 needed over 220,000 pounds of jet fuel, translating to roughly 34,000 gallons. That's not just an amount, that is essentially a high-speed liquid explosive moving down the tarmac. To give you scale, the aircraft that impacted the World Trade Center carried less than half that amount. Flight 2976 was arguably carrying 3 times the destructive potential. Imagine that colossal weight combined with the plane being near its absolute structural limit, the heaviest it would ever be.
Here they are rolling down the runway. I'm going to stop it right there. You can see that the left wing, right where the left engine is on fire. The nose of the airplane is already lifted off. So the bystander who is filming this video gets it just after that moment on the runway where they hit V1, but they haven't quite gotten to rotate speed just yet. And so somewhere in between that, what kind of a no man's land, I've had that gap be as much as 10 to 15 knots of airspeed. It seems like an eternity. After you hear V1, you expect to hear rotate right away. And if it's 10 or 15 knots before you hear it, man, you're rolling down that runway, burning up runway, knowing you can't stop on the runway ahead of you and you're going to go airborne and you're hoping that nothing happens. Now, pilots prepare for this all the time, but what happened here, that's not something you can plan for. That's right past the blast fence at the end of the runway. They've just barely cleared that by inches. And then, and we'll show you a picture of the top of the first building that they hit. There's this rut down the first top of the building. That could have been the landing gear. It could have been the left wing. And I'll tell you why in a minute. I think it's the left wing. I've got more video to show you. And now they create this huge fireball and the airplane goes for what seems like almost a mile. I'll show you that at the end, the video of how far this airplane went. how do I know that they weren't rejecting the takeoff when they went to the end of the runway because of how fast they were going? Typical rotate speed at this gross weight is going to be somewhere around 135 knots altogether, 140 maybe at the top. They were 45 knots past that. They were past that decision point and they were taken off already. They just simply couldn't get enough lift to get very far airborne, just enough to clear the fence. The airplane settles back in. So, what's the big picture on all this? What's the most critical phase of flight? The most critical phase of flight is the takeoff phase. Why is that? Because in the takeoff phase, you're the heaviest you're ever going to be. You got the most fuel on board that you're ever going to have. You're the slowest that you're ever going to go, and you're fully configured. And most importantly, you've got almost all of your power all the way up. So when you're landing, you're much lighter, you have much less fuel, and your power is pulled all the way back. So if you need to go around, you got all that power you can bring on to fly out of whatever situation you find yourself in. Not the same on a takeoff. So these guys are going down the runway. Something happens between V1 and rotate speed, and it's catastrophic. I have never seen an uncontained fire on an engine like this. Now, there's a video I'm going to show you here right now that is a picture of an engine sitting off of the runway. I've been told that it's the #1 engine off of this MD-11. It's not verified. None of the news services have reported that yet. So I don't want to get out over my skis on this because it could have been photoshopped. But if the left engine did fall off of this aircraft, it would explain a lot. You can see the engine is on fire as they're kind of, wobbling and rotating into the air. The engine might have already departed. It tore a bunch of the left side of the wing apart. You got this now uncontrolled fire going on, all of that loss of lift. And why the left knife edge? Because that right engine is still producing full power. So it's forcing the airplane to turn like this, right? And you're going to counter that with right rudder. You're going to try to bring the nose back around. But in a situation like this, where the engine on the left side has completely departed and you got full power on the right side, it's going to be so dramatic. It's going to be very, very difficult to keep that nose from coming all the way around to the left. So it does make sense that left wing or that left main mount gear would dig into that building as it was coming down into it. As it did that, the airplane kept rolling over. And as it rolled over on that knife edge, as you saw in the last video, they just kind of plowed right in and they just kept going with all of that momentum. There have been reports now I've listened to on several news agencies. Reuters was reporting that they hit a fuel farm or a fuel tank off the end of the runway. And that's why that huge big ball and why the fire continued for as long as it did. I'm here to tell you that 34,000 gallons of gas is about 3 times as much gas as the airplanes that hit the World Trade Center had. I was originally scheduled on that first airplane, and typically a flight from Boston to Los Angeles would, on a 767, you'd take around 85 to 90,000 pounds of gas, maybe 100 on a rare occasion. They've got well over 2.5 times that much fuel on this MD-11. There was a shot from a helicopter, and you can see the long trail of fire that goes out. It seems like forever. It looks like it's almost a mile off the end of the runway, and it's just really, really difficult to see that image because that airplane had so much momentum when it went off the end of the runway. But what we know at this point is for sure is that left engine was on fire. It was an uncontrolled flame out of that left engine that expanded to the left wing. It would kill almost all of the lift on that left wing. You have full power on the middle engine and the right engine, but not enough for them to continue to get airborne at the very, very high gross weight that they are on a trip all the way to Hawaii. They limp a little bit into the air, then they lose lift and they wallow back down to the earth. They hit that first building. The airplane rolls over on its left side in a knife edge. All that momentum continues to take it on for quite some distance, almost a mile. And what we know at this point is all 3 pilots have been reported dead by the major news agencies, and 11 people at least at this point have been taken to the hospital, and more, I'm assuming more. There's lots of missing people that they haven't identified yet. So when day breaks, I'm sure we're going to get updates. As we get updates on this and more information, I will certainly come to you with any sort of update, but that's what we know right now that happened just this evening in Louisville, Kentucky. Folks, hang in there. I know it's a tragedy. It's hard to watch